It's on now. Okay. Used to having to yell at you from the back. Everybody's here. Oh, that's true. Good evening, everybody. Did you have a good day? Beautiful morning. It didn't turn out so nice, but it got hot. But the morning was fantastic. Wet, cool. Glad you're here. Did you find out what Wednesday night is? Okay, this next week, Wednesday night's the first Wednesday night of the month, fellowship supper. So sloppy joes are on the menu. So bring whatever you think goes with that, like tater tots, corn nuts. Okay, that's enough sides. That's next week. So remember, next week when you come, bring your friends, bring your family. Let's come have a fellowship supper. Also, there was another announcement, but I don't remember somebody. Hudson House is tomorrow for the, if you want to go celebrate birthdays with our senior citizens at Hudson House. And, October, do we have the date set? Is it the 12th? The Fall Festival. So that's Sunday, October the 12th. Yeah, okay. I did too, but I forgot the date. And so that'll be fun. It'll be at 5, that's Sunday. I think it starts at 5 o'clock, if I remember correctly. And we'll have street tacos and axe pit and all kinds of games and fun, fellowship, celebrating fall, getting things in the mood. So I haven't thought that far ahead. I wouldn't think so because it's a whole week between those. Almost, yeah. So, Any other announcements? Okay. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for a beautiful day, for the rain that you've been sending and just the coolness. We're ready for fall, Lord, and we're grateful for it. Thank you for this place and the time we get to spend together tonight. I ask that you would just open our hearts, reveal yourself to us, and we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. If you have your book, we're in lesson 56 in our book, being Exodus chapter 15 and 16. Last week, as we were studying through, we found them out of Egypt. The children of Israel had left Egypt, got to the Red Sea, and we're familiar with the story, how God miraculously parted the Red Sea, and they crossed, and God stayed the Red Sea back on both sides, and then in his judgment on Pharaoh, they came into the middle, and then he released the walls of water, and Pharaoh and the armies of Egypt drowned. Just kind of recapping before we get to tonight, because I think it's important. What all have we seen God do with this generation of Israelites? So remember, they'd been in Egypt 430 years, thereabout, from the time that Joseph went. Then the miraculous release. What had we seen God do in their life? He had the Egyptians gift them with provision. The 10 plagues, they watched the miraculous hand of God move in the plagues. Watched Pharaoh beat the armies of Egypt and all of that. There's a reason I wanted to mention that, because we often talk harshly about this generation, and we will more, because they seem to not be able to get it. God reveals himself, does something, and they're all in, and then it's just very quickly they're grumbling, they're complaining, they're doubting, they're fearful, and then God does something. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention that is I think we often forget that for the whole time that they were in Egypt, if we follow the scripture, there was not a leader among them. From the time of Joseph forward until Moses came, they were just the children of Israel in a foreign land working as slaves for the last several generations. So you think about it, and they hadn't seen a movement of God. I'm sure they'd heard, the oral traditions of the promises of Abraham, but so I look at this generation that we're dealing with, and I go, it's a generation that basically grew up not knowing much about God. They really didn't know a ton, because God had not spoken. There wasn't a prophet. There wasn't a leader until Moses came. And so I want to give them some grace and understanding, because this was as much a life-changing situation for them as it was for anybody. And not just that they were leaving Egypt, but also that in the midst of leaving Egypt, never mind, carry on. In the midst of leaving Egypt, at the leadership of Moses, as God is dealing with Moses, and they're having to really step out in faith. So if you think about that, it is kind of a big step in faith for them to follow Moses and Aaron out of Egypt, because that's all they'd ever known. There wasn't anything else. The reason I wanted to say that is because I think oftentimes we forget, when we watch generations that haven't been taught well, and not just generations, but people in general. Sometimes we think people ought to know better, but I want to remind us that they don't know what they don't know. They really don't know what they don't know. And if they haven't been taught, why would my expectation be that they would miraculously just be godly, faithful, God-fearing people? And so as we start now, after they've crossed the Red Sea, they're on the other side. We're going to read in Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 27. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it in the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule. And there he tested them, saying, "If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. So 3 days out from the Red Sea, they traveling across the wilderness, and we've already discussed the fact that there was at least numbers of 2 million people, plus all of the livestock that they brought out. It takes a pretty good amount of water for that amount of people. They're 3 days out, and they aren't finding any water. And then they do find water, but it's not drinkable. I understand their fear. Have you ever been really thirsty? And I mean, like really, really thirsty? Like day one of thirst, day two of thirst? Anybody gone 3 days? No. When I was in junior high, our coach used to run us to death. No, we died and were resurrected multiple times. I knew him really well. We, of course, small town, everybody knew everybody. And I asked him one day, why? He said, "Well, you got to stay in shape." And I said, "Well, we're thirsty." He said, "No, you're not thirsty. You don't know what thirst is." And then I grew up realizing that he never left town without a cooler full of water, ever. He'd been in Vietnam, and he was a front ranger with a dog scouting, and he said there would be days that I didn't have any water for 1 or 2 or even, and he said, "I've been so thirsty I thought I would die, and I'll never be thirsty again." I mean, he doesn't go out to feed the dogs without a bottle of water. So I understand that thirst is a terrifying thing, and so they're out of Egypt. They've crossed the Red Sea. It's really going to be hard to go back. They're in the middle of the wilderness, already taken out across the desert, and the first thing that they encounter is no water. And then they find water. Thank you, Lord, there's water. Then they taste the water, and it's not drinkable. I've wondered a long time about that. The anticipation that God's going to take care of you, only to get to the only place that you find water and it's not usable. That would be disappointing, wouldn't it? And that's why it says, and they grumbled against who? Moses. They grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we going to drink?" And then Moses cried to the Lord, and the Lord, of course, showed him the log. I don't know what kind of log it was. Doesn't matter what kind of log it was. It wasn't the log that made it sweet. It was the act of faith of Moses picking up the log and throwing it in the water. This is the first thing that I want to say. Immediately, God brought them out of bondage, miraculously carried them across the Red Sea. I mean, there's no doubt that was God's hand moving them across the Red Sea, and then in 3 days tested them. Tested them. You ever had like a kind of a spiritual victory, kind of a high, something in your walk with the Lord, something like, wow, that was a high, kind of a high five kind of spiritual moment, awakening with God. You ever done that? And then it's not very long before it feels like the bottom falls out, the target's on your back, everything comes unwound. And I often have encountered that in my life and thought, well, what am I doing wrong? And I've realized nothing. God tests us as we grow. He tests us as we move. So he says to them, this is going to be a test. And this is the statute. This is the rules. These are the things I want you to do. Diligently listen to my voice. Do what is right in his eyes. Listen to his commandments and keep his statutes. If you'll do that, I'll take care of you. That's the promise, wasn't it? What do you think about the last part of his statement? Did anybody wrestle with that? If you do that, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians. It's just a threat. What's the only, thus far, move of God they've seen? The 10 plagues and the Red Sea. God used something familiar that to show his power. And he says, follow me. This won't happen to you. I thought that was interesting. The historical background on it, as you read through this, moves really quick. And so, instantly when they got there, what was their first instinct to do? To grumble. And what was Moses' first instinct? To call out to God. There's a lesson in that for us. The first sign of trouble, instead of grumbling, pray. Because I don't know, do you know of any situation ever solved through grumbling? Can you ever think of one time that fussing about it fixed it? Huh? No. You just focus on what's wrong and not on the solution. And so that's the first step as God leads them out and shows them not only his power, the ability once again to make bitter water sweet, to make unpalatable water palatable, to make unuseful water useful. It says, then after that test, they came to Elim. What was there? 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. And they encamped by the water. So think about that. The first test was the bitter water. They cried out. He didn't hold it against them. He didn't. He just said, okay, do this, and I'll take care of you. What was the next thing God did? Gave them tons of water and shade and a place to rest. So on every side of the test, would I be fair in saying that there is a blessing that God provides on the other side of the test? Yeah, there is. I don't like tests. I don't like any kind of tests. I don't like it when he's doing that. In fact, one of my mentor pastors used to tell me, he said, one thing you're going to need to learn is whenever God's testing you in something, you need to pray, and you need to pray a lot, and you need to pray specifically, Lord, help me learn what you're trying to show me so I can get past this test. And I think that's a fair prayer. So after this incident, then God gave them rest, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. And they encamped by the water. Chapter 16, they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. That's always struck me funny. Sin, as we call sin, this is actually the name of the wilderness. Now, it may have been for a reason, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, they departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel, what'd they do? Grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Just gave them water, provision. They walk a little ways, and then they start grumbling. The whole congregation of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, would that we have died at the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, so the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Now we're going to read about that. So let's preface this. They griped about water. God provided water. A few days later, they're wandering around. How much food would it take for 2 million plus people and all the livestock? How much provision did they bring out of Egypt? What they could carry. They didn't have a pack train loaded down. They gathered what they could carry and they left in a hurry. Remember that? So they knew they didn't have much provision. They've already ran through what they had. Now we're out in the wilderness, and there is not an Allsups, there's not a United, there is nowhere to go, get nothing. So what do? They grumble. Okay, lesson number 2. What do? Pray. So they're going to learn the lesson. But their first instinct is to grumble, to gripe. And it says, again, they grumbled against who? Moses and Aaron. You brought us out. Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. We wish God had killed us in Egypt rather than drag us out here and we starved to death. The Lord said to Moses, I'm going to rain bread from heaven, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may what? Test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Now, what was the statute that he just given them at the water hole? Do what I say, follow what I tell you, walk in my way. Basically, he's saying, trust me to take care of you. On the 6th day, wait a minute. 4, 5. Yeah, on the 6th day, when they prepared what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. It's an important point that Moses makes. He said, you've been griping at me and Aaron. Well, it's not me and Aaron that you're really griping about. You're grumbling to the Lord. You're complaining about the Lord's provision, about what God's doing. Now, I took that in a very serious sense, because me and Sandra have been married for a long, long time. We've been through a few tests together. And I have learned over the years that whenever we enter into some kind of test, time of testing, that my first inclination is to grumble against Sandra. Or it's to grumble against my boss. Or it's to grumble against, when I was in Bible college, it was to grumble against all of the professors and their stupid grading scale. It was to grumble against, that's our first inclination, is to look at those immediately and start griping. Moses and Aaron finally said, all right, you need to understand something. Who are we? We're not the ones that brought you out. We're not the ones that gave you water. We're not the ones that brought the plagues. We're not the ones that parted the Red Sea. It's not us. You're grumbling against the Lord. So I've learned in life that when I begin to grumble, it's always that I end up, but I don't want to say it, but I'm griping at God about the way he's doing things. Anybody else ever do that? But we use somebody else in their place because we don't want to be guilty of griping to God or about God, so we pick somebody. That's what they're doing. And Moses said, now listen, he's heard you and he knows. In verse 8, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumblings, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And in the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, dew lay around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? They did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall take an omer, according to the number of the persons that each of you has in his tent. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered, some more, some less. When they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till morning. So God, provision. We've heard of manna. We're talking about the manna. And it's interesting because that's what manna means, is what is it? Nobody knows what manna was. But it was God's provision. So, and we kind of blow past the fact that quail covered the camp. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like quail. I'm kind of a fan of quail. And they're griping about the meat pots and the bread in Egypt. And God says, why do you need the meat pots of Egypt? I'm the Lord your God. I'll provide you with meat and manna. So this was a new experience. Nowhere before had they gone out after the dew left and gathered whatever the dew residue was, turned it into bread. But God said, do that. He said, only gather how much? What you could eat for the day. Yeah. An omer is about 2 quarts. Enough. Now, he was very clear to not gather more. Some gathered some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. That's an interesting thing about God's provision. It's always right. Whatever they gathered was what they needed. God provided what they needed. And each of them gathered as much as he could eat. Now this is important. We read it. I want to come back to it in verse 19. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. They did not listen to Moses, and some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. So it went away. I do want to make a slight comment. You all discuss it with me. Why, when they were given instructions to not leave any over, did some people leave some over? Lack of trust. They're human beings. Afraid it wouldn't come back. Yeah, might wake up hungry. Might need something about 2 a.m. Or they were curious. He said, don't. Well, what if I do? Has anybody ever done that with the Lord? God says don't, and you said, well, what if I do? What happens? Well, find out. Now, this has always fascinated me. Have you ever, eat Chinese food or something, sometime got sick as a dog? Then every time you smelled Chinese food, you couldn't eat it again forever, or whatever said food is. Anybody ever experienced that? And when you see it to this day, you go, mm? Can you imagine that the thing you're going to eat for the next 40 years stank and had worms in it because you didn't follow God? And every time you went out to make it, all you could smell was that stinking stuff with worms crawling in it. Yeah. Because we disobey constantly, we create problems that don't need to exist. We create misery for ourselves unnecessarily. I don't know about you, but the fact that God is providing for this grumbling, griping, untrusting, seemingly unfaithful group of people, but yet he continues to provide for them, to lead them, to instruct them. When I read that, and I find, if I could be so bold, I find comfort in the fact that God is patient with us and that God understands our humanity and that God gets why we get nervous and understands why we get grumbly. I find comfort in that fact. Now, I don't find enough comfort in it to think, well, then it's okay to just be that way. That's not what I'm saying. But you know as well as I do that there are times in life when things get weird and things get hard and we begin to doubt a little bit. Is the provision going to be there? We begin to hoard a little bit because, well, we're selfish. We want more than what we need. We begin to think about, we'll get to that another place. They're like, we are so sick of eating this. We missed the onions from Egypt. Okay, fine. But the important part of that is to remember God's provision and the fact that God so faithfully provided for them. Even when they griped at him, they grumbled at him, they didn't trust him, they didn't believe him. They just straight up disobeyed. They said, don't take more than you need. Don't try to keep it. Okay, let's keep some. It's almost like they're children of Israel, like we are children oftentimes in the way we trust God. So, on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Where have we seen the holy Sabbath to the Lord before? In our study. At creation, when God rested on the seventh day. And this is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left overlay aside to be kept until the morning. So they laid it aside till the morning. And Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there was no worms. Interesting, if you do it God's way, it don't go bad. If you do it your way, it rots. Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. Is that pretty clear, guys? How are we going to do this? Every day we go out and we gather what we need for that day. On the 6th day, we gather what we need for 2 days, because on the 7th day, there won't be any. Repeat after me. How are we going to do this? Simple, right? Why are the simple things hard? Because we make them hard. On the seventh day, some of the people went out together, but they found none. Like, are you serious? What did he just say? There won't be any. Gather twice what you need on the sixth day, because on the seventh day there won't be any. And what'd they do? Some. Well, let's go look. Let's go see. No. I wanted to pause there and just ponder that for a minute. Does this not seem like the most simplistic thing God's told him to do thus far? Like, I'm pretty sure anybody could understand that. But yet on the seventh, some went out. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. Again, how did God deal with their disobedience? He did not change the plan. He did call them out on it, did he not? Did he not correct them? Did he stop bringing manna? Said, if that's where you're going to be, figure it out on your own. No. He put them in a timeout. You go sit in the corner for. Yeah. Moses I didn't go out, God. But the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? And that's an interesting concept. Can I just ask a blunt question? How long will we continue to skirt around the things we know God wants us to do? How long will we keep trying to push the limit? How long will we go, yeah, I know God said not to, but y'all have heard the saying, I grew up with it. In life, it's easier to get forgiveness than it is permission. That don't work with God. That's not how God works. He gave them clear, and why? Now let's think about the process. Why would he set apart the seventh day? There's not going to be food. Don't try to gather. Cook enough to eat. Why? Because it's a day of rest. It's a day of rest. Yeah. So, yeah, Karen makes a good point. Remember, their knowledge of God was limited. So he's not unloading theological truths. He's saying, do this. Simplistically. Like Karen said, spoon feeding them, this is what you do. I've given you a statute. Earlier I said, do what I tell you and you won't have issues. That's the Jeff version. Teaching them to trust him. Yeah. And parents, I'm just going to make a point. Parents blow that trust thing with kids when they're feeding them and then they stick green peas on the spoon. You're eating French fries and mashed potatoes and peaches, and then they stick that stuff on the spoon. And you lose trust. God doesn't function that way. God, Karen makes a great point. God is knowing how little they know and how he's training and teaching them, gives them basic, simplistic instructions. And they struggle with that. They struggle with that. And so my question still stands, how far will we push God, and why do we keep pushing God? And when we understand exactly what it is that he's commanded us to do, why do we not do it? How long will we refuse to keep his commandments? The Lord has given you the Sabbath. Now, and here's something I always want to point out. God gave us the Sabbath. He didn't need to take a day of rest from creation because it was no effort for God to create. But he created beings that need a day of rest. And it's a day set apart. And if you think about it in the context, he says, we're going to be marching across the wilderness. We're in a relationship. And I want you to take a day for your body to rest, for your mind to rest, but for your spirit to focus. And I remember, Jolene mentioned a minute ago, some of y'all don't even know what blue laws are. I remember them when nothing was open on Sunday. I remember in the little country town I grew up in when they finally allowed a gas station to open on Sunday for travelers. That was the only thing open, not a cafe, not a grocery store. Nothing was open on Sunday. And they finally opened up a gas station. So they cracked the blue law. And then it wasn't very long till there was a gas station and a grocery store. And then a gas station, a grocery store, and a cafe. What happens when you crack the Sabbath? And we can watch our culture. Now, I know Sunday is not the Sabbath. It's our day of rest set apart based on the resurrection of Jesus Christ and when they gathered. Sabbath is Saturday. That's the Jewish Sabbath is on Saturday. I'm not going to make much of a discussion about that, but I do know this, that we live in a 7-day week. 6 days you labor, and the 7th day you what? And I know as well as you know that rest now is, if you are a Christian, you go to church, and then you go do stuff. Mow the yard, because we didn't take time to do it Saturday. I'm not going to make a big statement here. I don't need to make a statement. God's made the statement. On the 7th day, you what? Rest from your labors. And watch a Cubs game. No, because those sinful Cubs are working. They're playing. Yeah, Jolene makes a point. At a certain age, Sabbath is easy to keep because you sleep in your chair as soon as you sit down. Get home from church and so I get that. I just want to make a comment culturally that we're not much different than the disobedient Israelites, are we? We're really not that much different. We push God's boundaries and we disobey the simplistic things. How hard is it to understand on the 7th day you rest? Do no work. Day of reflection, it's a day of worship, it's a day of rest. Anybody understand that? Do we know what that means? It means when you get out of church, you mow your yard. Only if you have a riding lawnmower. That was the invention of the riding lawnmower, so it wouldn't be walking. No. But see, that's what we do, isn't it? We try to justify. I'm just saying, I'm not going to tell you what to do on Sunday because I don't have to tell you what to do on that day because God's already done that. It's not my job. He's already said that. But immediately we see people pushing back. Now, lack of trust, that was mentioned. They went out to see if it was going to be there. May have been lack of trust, or it may have been said, is what he said true? Let's see. It's not like there's not going to be any, what are we going to do? It's like, if God says there ain't going to be, I want to see if that, there really isn't. Okay. He said there wouldn't be. Maybe they hid some. Well, it turned into maggots. And maggot bread's not good. Good point. Some of them may have went because they were too lazy on Saturday to gather enough for 2 days. So didn't plan well. Didn't plan well. So, on the seventh day, some of the people went out and found none. And then I wanted to read verse 29. See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place, and let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. Now, the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations, as the Lord commanded Moses. So Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The people of Israel ate the manna 40 years till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And if you need to know, an omer is a 10th part of an ephah. So there you go. Now you know. Now, interesting thing. God had said if you gather it and you try to store it, it will go bad. And then he tells Moses, tell Aaron to gather some and put it in a pot and put it and keep it forever. Does this make sense to you? Why did that not go bad? Because God commanded to gather it. Yeah, it was in the ark. It was in the Ark of the Covenant. And if they ever found it, there would still be. So a few questions over this, and then we'll kind of surmise. Let's go back to the water. What was the purpose of God bringing them to bitter water to start with? To test them, see how they would respond. And to show his glory, his capacity to provide in the midst of nothing. Mm-hmm. What else does he need to show them? Mike said when they crossed the Red Sea, they walked through the middle of the Red Sea on dry ground. What else does he need to show them? That is pretty powerful. But yet, he shows them again, and he shows them again. And the purpose of it was to test the people to see if they would grumble or call out to God. And that's really the test for us in all of the struggles, whether it's bitter water, whether it's a lack of bread, whatever it is, the test of it is, will I call out unto God or will I grumble about the situation? Will I take it to the Lord and trust in the Lord, or will I handle it in the flesh? And the flesh will always gripe about it, every time. Now, obviously, these themes come up, and we understand the Old Testament is everything about the Old Testament points us to Christ, right? I mean, that's the point of the Old Testament. It's the covenant of redemption from the fall of man forward and the coming of the Redeemer. And Israel is the chosen people that will bring forth the Messiah. So we follow the life of Israel and God's interaction with Israel. These themes come up over and over again, and so I don't want to not mention this. They needed water and bread. Those are two sustenance things that all of us need, right? You can't live without water and you can't live without food. That's a fact. You can for a minute. You can live longer without food than you can water. But eventually, if you don't have water or food, you perish. And so these are embedded in the gospel story. And then what does Jesus call himself? I am the bread of life. I am the living water. If you drink of me, you will never thirst again. Don't miss what God is showing through the story as it takes us to the New Testament and to the redemption of Christ. He was a gift from above. I want us to just kind of pause and ponder for a minute the people of Israel and the struggle that they had to walk in faith and obedience. If you're with us on Sundays, you know we've been going through the book of Judges, and the book of Judges is the book of disobedience. When they turned their back on God and followed after false gods, and God would raise up a judge and correct course, and then they would fall away. So I look at them and I see this cycle of obedience, disobedience. I see this struggle of God clearly laying out his plan for them and the benefit. And how if they do as God has laid out, he will bless them. He will take care of them. I watch that and then I reflect and I go, yeah. And we still fight the same fight in the flesh today to trust in God's provision. We still fight the same fight today to be simply obedient to the simplistic things that God lays before us. It's not hard. The walk that God lays out before us is really not hard, but you have to be intentional. It's a very intentional walk. And these things that we're watching them do, I look at it, I'm like, you goobers, you know better than that. And yet, I look at myself in the mirror every morning and I, to be honest, have to say, you goober, you know better than that. So I want to make a couple of comments on applications. The main thing that I don't want us to lose this is that we get hung up looking at Israel and oftentimes forget to look at God. And the point of this is, yeah, Israel struggles. God doesn't. Israel wrestles with keeping the promise. God never struggles with keeping his promise. God's provision and the way that he provided in miraculous way with the water, and then we'll get to another passage and there's not any water and they start grumbling again, and God says, okay, hit the rock, and he splits the rock and water comes out. God's always providing for them. And again, I want to remind us that they didn't have much knowledge of God, but they're learning God as they're going. And so I also want to remind us to not feel like we fail constantly when we struggle with obedience, when we wrestle with doing things God's way. I want us to be mindful of that, but understand that we are learning as we're going. Life is a learning experience, and life with God is a process of growth. It's a process of trial and error and testing. And I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm not as far down the road in my maturity and my understanding as I wish I was, but I also know that if I don't intentionally work on those things and focus on those, I'll never get there. And so comparing ourselves to them, I can see that even though they continued to complain, God continued to provide. Even though they continued to stumble, God continued to lift them up and carry them on. And it's the same in our life. But at some point, we have to be willing to say, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why do I keep doing the same thing? Anybody ever wrestle with that? If only I could be like solid in my faith, like, Paul, like the Apostle Paul. One of my heroes in Scripture. Anybody else like the Apostle Paul? Man sold out for Jesus, wasn't he? And he never wrestled with this kind of stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, he did. Because the Apostle Paul said, why is it that the things that I should be doing, I'm not doing, and the things I shouldn't be doing, I find myself doing? Oh, wretched man that I am. Who will save me from this? Understand, guys, it is the human experience. We have one of two choices. We can become comfortable in that and just accept it as, well, I can't help it. I'm just a person. Or we can say, I understand that I am human. But the goal is set before me. And like the Apostle Paul said, I strive towards the goal. Not that I have finished yet, but I strive towards the goal of the high calling of Christ. I strive every day to be more like Christ in obedience, in faithfulness, in trust. And so as we look at these folks, it's easy to point the spiritual finger and go, you guys are just dumb. I don't get you. How could you do that? All the way up till Jesus was there, and then they stood at the cross and yelled, crucify him. How could they be so dumb? Because they don't know what they don't know. And that's the point of why we study, is to learn what it means to be a child of God, what it means to walk in faith, what it means to walk in the provision of God. And so, thoughts or comments? I underlined a thought that I pray I never find myself. The Israelites' response to lack of water and lack of food was that I would be willing to trade my freedom to go back into the bondage of Egypt. And I ponder on that. Because Christ has set us free from the chains of death, the chains of sin. And he set us free, and Jesus says himself, if you're free in me, you're free indeed. And we walk as free men, but oftentimes it seems as though we're willing to exchange our freedom for the bondage of self and sin and go back to Egypt to sit by the meat pots of the world. So, we lean on the things that we know. Don't forget in this story, God has not changed one bit. God never changes. His character is the same today, yesterday, and forever. His promises are the same. His faithfulness is new every morning. His mercies pour out upon us. And so when we look at the unfaithfulness and the struggles of man, may we quit looking at man and look to the faithfulness of God and the person of God, the character of God, and understand that we are more than conquerors, if you would, in Him. In Him. So, final thoughts. Anybody? Just Jake. I can do all things. I can do all things with Christ. No, that's not what it says. I can do all things through Christ. He doesn't just come along as a road buddy. And he's not my co-pilot. If he's the co-pilot, we're crashing. No, I can do all things through Christ. Cool. Anybody else have a thought? All right. Well, thank you for your discussion. Brother Steve, would you dismiss us?